Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. Today we're going to talk about stainless steel. I've done a few videos on helping beginners with scrap metal, and stainless steel is one of the most confusing ones for hobby scrappists. So I've laid out a bit of a selection on my table here. We'll go through them and I'll just give you some ideas on basics on how to pick stainless steel, what's the more valuable, and how to process it basically. Give you the best return for your scrap metal. Tools of the trade for the hobbyist as far as scrapping goes: a magnet, that's a microwave magnet, extremely handy item. I've got them stuck to every metallic surface all around the place. A file, I've got files scattered everywhere. This one's been in the yard for a while, so it's kind of a bit rusty, but a file's really important. If you want to get a bit more serious, an angle grinder is very handy, and we'll use these three to help us sort out this big pile of potential stainless steel. Now, there are many types of stainless steel. They make lots of different grades, and they all have different alloyed metals to perform different functions. The general idea of stainless steel is that it doesn't rust, of course, but we will find that most scrap yards really don't get too involved unless you've got large quantities. They don't get too concerned about what particular alloy you've got. They really just separate them, and it'd be worth checking with your own yard, but they really just separate them into non-magnetic and magnetic. So the first thing we're going to do is use the magnet and divide all this big haul of stuff into magnetic and non-magnetic, and then we'll take the next step. Here we go, the segregation is complete. On our left we have all the non-magnetic metal, which doesn't prove it's stainless steel, but it proves that it's not ferrous, it's not normal steel. And on this side we have all the magnetic, and again it doesn't necessarily prove or disprove that it's stainless steel. We'll have to look a bit further. So I've divided them from a really definite, clearly not magnetic, no attraction. Sometimes you can get a very faint attraction, which is fine, and on this side they all 100% stick to the magnet, there's no doubt. So that's the first step, easy to separate those two. Let's look at the magnetic first and see where we can go with that. Now, stainless steel, as I mentioned, is one of the most confusing for beginner scrappers because the metal can look similar to other metals. Now, just looking at it, we've proved that this is ferrous, it's steel, but is it stainless? Is it chrome plated? Is it nickel plated? And sometimes you can have stuff that's very dirty and almost looks rusted, but it actually is stainless because the piece that was sitting on top of it has rusted, and even though it's contrary to its name, it has actually stained it. However, that would clean off very well, but you certainly can't judge from seeing rust. One of the clues you can use is where you got it from. These two strips here, even though they're quite dirty, I know they're stainless steel because they came out of a dishwasher. Now, no manufacturer is going to use chrome plated normal steel in a dishwasher, or nickel plated, or any plate, because it will rust very quickly, so it needs to be stainless. However, this is magnetic. Sometimes the actual tubs out of dishwashers are non-magnetic stainless, and sometimes they're magnetic, so you do need the magnet to separate. And the reason we are separating, just before I get into this, the deciding which is stainless and which isn't, scrapyards differentiate between the two, and they pay a much higher price for non-magnetic stainless steel. I think they often class it as 304, if I remember correctly. Now, stainless is an alloy of iron with lots of other things, but it has to contain a minimum of 11% chromium, which gives it that anti-rust characteristic. It could also contain carbon, nitrogen, aluminium, silicon, sulfur, titanium, nickel, copper, selenium, molybdenum, and a few others. So that list courtesy of Wikipedia, but it just shows you how many different grades of stainless steel you can actually get. So back to the basics. We're just separating the non-magnetic because it pays a lot better. Scrapyards will pay, currently it's $1.30 a kilo in Australia, so it's going to pay pretty well, particularly when you get nice big heavy chunks. The stainless steel that is magnetic, they are only quoting me at the moment 32 cents a kilo, so that's nearly $1 a kilo cheaper. So is it worth separating? You could quite easily and happily group all that side of the table with your normal clean pressing steel, because at the moment they're paying 23 cents a kilo for that. So you're only, what, 9 cents a kilo better off if you took down a load of this, whichever one is stainless steel but it's magnetic. So it's up to you to make that call. I probably won't, I'm not sure. I've got to cart my scrap about an hour and a half down to Melbourne. I don't want to have big tubs weighing 100 kilos that are only going to, you know, pay me a little bit extra for all the effort to separate it. However, some of you live quite close to a scrapyard and the prices may improve down the track. So I'll show you how to separate the stainless from the non-stainless in this pile. And as I said, we can't go on the rust really, because it could be just staining. But what we can do is use rust as a tool. Whoops, sorry, I've interrupted the flow of that. My camera went flat. So I was up to telling you how we can use rust and the metal developing rust as a tool to decide what is stainless steel and what isn't. And I found some samples here. It's actually the next day now. And I ground a piece with the grinder. You could equally use a file if you don't have a grinder, and clean the metal back a decent spot, and then leave it out overnight or in a damp area. You can assist a little bit with sprinkling a little bit of salt on it. Those of you that live near the ocean will well know that salty water is very corrosive, and quite often your cars suffer for it if you live near the beach. So what we're going to do is to bare the metal back of any plating and see what happens. Now this spike was only yesterday, and clearly that's rusted very quickly. I left it out overnight in the dew with a bit of salt, and you can see that that's definitely not stainless, that's fresh rust. So that's probably chromed, that spike. This piece was done the same time, in the same conditions, and that still looks perfectly clean and shiny. So that's clearly a stainless steel. The pipe was interesting in that it rusted very quickly. In fact, that showed signs of rust after an hour. And here's one that's been in the yard for a few weeks, same pipe. And if you look closely at that, the grinding has actually gone through the outer layer, so it's actually plated with like a stainless steel. It's quite a thick sleeve, and underneath is just basic iron and rusted very quickly. This old panel off a barbecue, magnetic. I was going to throw it straight in the steel and thought I better give it a test, because, you know, I thought that might have been rust, but maybe it's just a bit of grime from years of barbecuing. And I ground a patch on it, and look at that, spotlessly clean, and that's been in the weather for over a month. So clearly that's a stainless steel, and these little spots aren't rust, they may be just staining from something it was next to. So if you want to go to that trouble, that's how you will identify stainless steel. If it's magnetic, unless it is perhaps nickel, which is pretty rare to come across. Now these ones that haven't rusted at all will have a higher nickel content, and nickel is magnetic. There are some like this rail out of the dishwasher that I would have sworn was stainless steel, and I'm sure it is, but it does show, this has been out in the weather for a few days, it does show some signs of rusting. So it might have a lower nickel content. As I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different alloy mixes, and perhaps that's a lower quality stainless steel that they use in a cheap dishwasher. So there you go, that's how you can identify it. Now where does that leave us? Well, you have to make up your mind if it's worth going to this trouble. As I mentioned earlier, the prices on magnetic stainless steel are not a lot higher than they are for just clean normal pressing steel, which all of these would be grouped under if you wanted to go that way. Now this dishwasher tub is magnetic. If we touch a magnet on it, it's clearly magnetic. Every panel is. So if we filled that, supposing we filled that with what we've identified as stainless steel, magnetic stainless steel, and the whole tub weighs about 50 kilos, it would be manageable. You could move it around, but it would be heavy and it'd be difficult to load on your own onto a trailer. If you took that down to the scrapyard with all your sorting to make sure it's nice and clean, no impurities, magnetic stainless steel, 50 kilos, and they paid you, let's round it down and say 30 cents a kilo, you've got $15. Now, if you didn't worry about the time sorting, didn't have to take off brackets that might be steel on the side of it, didn't have to worry about your file and rust test, and threw all of the magnetic stuff into this tub, save yourself a lot of time in sorting and mucking around getting it all clean, and you had your 50 kilos and you got paid say 20 cents a kilo for clean pressing steel, there's $10. So the question you've got to ask yourself, is it worth going to all that sorting time and perhaps a special load of magnetic stainless to make yourself $5 extra per 50 kilo tub? So based on that theory, I'm not going to worry, but keep an eye on your scrapyard prices, because they may change, particularly because these ones are going to have a high percentage of nickel. Perhaps if the price of nickel takes off, then that might become more valuable. But in the current climate, I'm going to put all my pressing steel with my magnetic stainless, put them in tubs, not worry about taking other metal brackets off. As long as there's no plastic or rubber, you'd have to get the black sticky insulation off the side if you're going to sell the tub as clean pressing steel, and take it all down and in the trailer with a big load of other steel, and then I get my 20 cents a kilo, and there's very little work as far as not having to segregate different types of metals. So that's where I'm up to with that. What that leaves us with is all the stuff that a magnet did not stick to. So let's have a look at that and see how we can ascertain what's stainless and what might be something else. Just before we get into that, here's another dishwasher tub. Now this one is non-magnetic. All sides are non-magnetic, and for a comparison from our other example, if we filled this to the 50 kilo mark with non-magnetic stainless steel, which, as I said, I was quoted $1.30 the other day, we would have a total of $65 for the one tub. Now that is certainly worth, I think, loading up and taking a load down. These tubs do make great containers. I've punched a few holes in the bottom with a little mini crowbar that just punched holes straight through the metal, so it will drain water fine. It can be out in the weather. Perhaps you wouldn't want it to fill up with leaves, but certainly doesn't matter if it gets rained on, because guess what? The stuff doesn't rust. It's going to look nice and clean. And $65 per tub is well worth it. So that's just an interesting comparison. Stainless steel, look out for the non-magnetic stuff, and I think forget about the magnetic stuff. Anyway, my job is to present you with some information. You can make up your own mind depending on your own situation. So now we need to identify which of this non-magnetic pile, not counting the pen, is actually stainless steel. Because we've proved that it's not ferrous, we don't need the magnet anymore because none of it sticks. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, I think, unless I mentioned it on the part that didn't get recorded because of my camera, you can sometimes establish what is stainless steel from its situation. A saucepan, well-known stainless steel, quite often it actually says it on the bottom. This one, of course, the handle would need to come off, but that's non-magnetic. It's definitely stainless steel, and you can tell the colour, and the colour is something you'll get used to because stainless steel does have its own type of silvery sheen. However, sometimes it's going to be dirty, and there's going to be other metals that kind of look close depending on the light. So we'll test them again, but we can be fairly sure that the saucepan stainless steel, that's the lid off a coffee pot, so it has that stainless steel look, so we're pretty certain on that one. This is a housing from a water pump. Now they're not going to make a water pump housing out of material that will rust, but then we've sorted that out with a magnet anyway. They do make water pump housings out of brass, so it could be plated brass. So we need to establish what's stainless steel. So what other tools can we use? Well, we've talked about the file. That's a good tool. So let's look at what the file can tell us. Sometimes you can have plated brass or plated copper or other metals, and the file will show up what's underneath the plating. And here's a good example. I filed a little bit before to save trying to do it one-handed. That is that really obvious clear copper colour. If you pardon the reflection of my tree above me. So this is actually chromed copper. So it's not magnetic, but it's not stainless steel. Now actually that pays a lot more than stainless steel. So it'd go as number 2 copper because it's chromed, but the difference in price is instead of $1.30 we're going to be getting, you know, around $6 or something. So we've ruled that one out of stainless steel. This one actually is marked EPNS. Now that stands for electroplated nickel silver. So it is actually silver plated, which does have almost like a stainless steel look. A file on this would show us a base metal that's pretty much a silvery colour. So that doesn't help us much there, not like it does with the copper. But the EPNS tells us the base metal is nickel silver, which actually is an alloy of copper and nickel, and sometimes they throw in a few other metals. The characteristic with silver plate is you often get this black kind of tarnish, which the silver does. So it's not magnetic, but it's not stainless steel. And I don't know how the scrapyards buy nickel silver. It is a high percentage of copper, and I am saving up quite a lot of this. Most of you wouldn't see very much of it, and some of you might even try, some of you who are into metal refining might even try to reverse electroplate the silver. I'm not going to go down that path unless silver becomes a lot more valuable, but I'm yet to work out how I can sell that, but I know it's a high percentage of copper. But anyway, for the purposes of this video, we know it's not stainless steel. This other one is a silver plated look as well. It has some corrosion coming through, which is typical of copper, that verdigris, the green kind of rust. And this one is actually stamped silver on copper, if you can see that in there somewhere. So quite often things will tell us what they actually are. If we were to file this one, and I didn't do it, we should get the copper colour underneath. And it's a bit hard to tell there, but yeah, that's definitely a pinkish. So that could go as number 2 copper as well, even though it's silver plated. Now, what else have we got? This one's not rusty, it's off the top of a stove. You often get stainless steel on stoves because they don't want them to rust, but this one's very light, and if I run a file across it, whilst it still looks silver, it's very soft. And most of you would pick that as aluminium or aluminum, depending where you're from. So that's easy to differentiate from stainless steel. It's very soft to file. With your eyes closed, the amount that file digs into the metal, you would know that it's either copper or aluminium just from the way it cuts in. And I've seen guys get a knife as well and just slide a knife blade along the copper, and it will, along the aluminium, and it will actually peel some of the metal off. So you won't get that on stainless steel. Any metal that's light and soft and silver is going to be aluminium that the average scrapper comes across. Here's another sheet. This one does have a stainless steel type look to it, but a quick file and we can feel it's very soft. It's silver underneath. That's another piece of aluminium, as is this tray out of a griller as well. The handle though has a slightly different sheen to it. We'll try the magnet. Not magnetic, it's put on with rivets, certainly a different colour metal. So let's try the file on that. Now, it's very hard. You can hear the difference. It's getting a bit windy here, so I apologise for any wind noise. But that is actually stainless steel. I can tell because it's silver underneath. It's very hard to file, and that would be easy to separate. aluminium rivets. I'd probably even leave her off with a screwdriver, being aluminium is nice and soft. So that's a piece of stainless steel, can go in our bin with the other non-magnetic stainless. The rest of it can now be sold as aluminium. And these other ones, these are all stainless steel. They've all got that same sort of sheen to them. They're all hard to file. It's almost hard sometimes to get the file to bite. So nice and hard, non-magnetic, definitely stainless steel. And we'll scan across the rest of them. These are all sheets of stainless steel. There's a bracket off something, and that's non-magnetic stainless steel. So is that, and so is that. Now a lot of cookware, toasters, kettles normally are stainless and good quality stainless, but often toasters and bread makers and a lot of those type kitchen appliances, even fridges now, the stainless steel look is quite popular. The best way to sort them out is the magnet. They're probably all going to be stainless steel, but we want the non-magnetic ones. Check them with a file if you like. You can sometimes have a plated brass, and you'll see the yellow underneath from brass if that's the case. The arm from in a dishwasher, as long as it's not magnetic, it's going to be fine to go in your stainless steel bin, your non-magnetic stainless steel bin. And some of these old shafts out of pumps and things, and that's a threaded piece of pipe that's quite thick. A lot of water fittings were either brass or stainless steel because of their corrosion resistance. It's easy to see if they're brass or not because you'll get a nice big yellow base metal. These are both definitely stainless steel, very hard to file, and the good thing about these, they're quite heavy, so it's always worth grabbing. Anything that doesn't go rusty outside is worth checking, and check with the magnet as well. Now, I've spent quite a while talking about a file, and I think it's important to understand different metals and how a file reacts to them. You get a good feel for the softness of metals and everything like that. But now I'm going to just finish off this video with a more simple test and almost a more accurate test for a lot of you, and that's using an angle grinder. Of course, not everyone has one of these, so another reason to get your file skills up to date. But also, sometimes you might not have access to power and you might not have a cordless grinder. So, you may have heard of the spark test. This is probably the easiest and quickest method to check if what you have is stainless steel. So let's just run around and touch a few of these with the grinder and just see what happens. Now, the saucepan for a start. So you can see sparks coming off that lid very clearly. And here's that coffee pot lid and part of the pump housing. We'll try those. And we'll also try these two heavier pieces that we had. Now let's mix it up, and we'll try the piece of silver plate, EPNS. No sparks there, and yet we have a silver base metal. Let's try the copper. Definitely no sparks there, and you can now see the copper very clearly. Let's try the aluminium. Again, you can see the silver metal, but it was very soft, we felt that, and clearly no sparks. Let's do this other aluminium tray, which had the piece of stainless steel on front. So there you go, you can see how easy it is to tell with the grinder. If it's non-magnetic and it does spark, you've got good quality stainless steel, and the aluminium and your copper and all the other non-ferrous metals won't spark at all. So I think that's about it. I don't really have to go through anything else. Use a magnet, use a file. If you want to grind a big patch and do rust tests, I find it a bit easier with a grinder because you can take any plating off straight away. So there you go. I hope that answered some questions for you. Feel free to ask anything underneath. Any of you experienced scrappers, feel free to add something I may have missed, but that should cover the topic of stainless steel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.